So, parenting.
Parenting. So she's about to enter the world of parenting.
Mm,
You're about to enter the world of parenting for a second time.
I know, yeah.
Yes.
So what
And
advice are
I'm
you going
a
to give a first-time parent?
so actually I got a piece of advice that someone gave me that I think is actually two pieces of advice. The first one,
Yeah.
I feel that parents these days read too much. Okay.
Read too much. Okay.
Read too much. So many resources out there. You've got blogs, you've got forums, you've got books, you've got everything. Everything that you could possibly want to know is
Mm,
available at your fingertips. But that's really dangerous. And the other thing also is the control that parents often want in the schedule of their children.
mm.
Um, when they start weaning, when they need to be sleeping through the night, when they will. So before I became a parent, a colleague of mine I was given about 5 books by a previous colleague who was happy to
Five
just
books.
get rid
Wow.
of his 5 parenting books.
Wow.
Um,
Now,
and she saw me carrying these through the office and she went, and I said, "Oh, look, such and such gave me all these books." And she's like, she had 1 kid at the time, and she said, "My piece of advice for you," and I think
mm,
someone gave it to her as well, "is to read it once and then throw it away." Because if you start relying on the resources too much, you start forgetting your instincts. You start forgetting to pay attention to the child because
mm,
they're meant to fit a formula. You don't fit a formula. As a human being, I'm not the same as you. I have a different sleep schedule to you.
exactly.
How is that any different for a baby? So I tried to pay attention to that. And it's to read it once just to know what's coming, to know when teething's coming, to know when this is coming, that is coming, this sickness, whatever. But we really need to pay attention to the child. And if you're in the books, then you're not paying attention to the child. So that's the one piece of advice.
Well said.
And the second one is to savor the moments because the days are long, but the years are short. And that is so true. Um, so my 2 girls
Hmm.
have both had their birthdays in the last week. One
Yeah.
turned 6, and one turned 3, and the time has flown, just flown. Can't believe it.
How does it feel to be a mum?
Um, I waited a while to become a mum. I think what a lot of us do these days, right?
Mm,
Like we want to build a career, we want to have the relationship with our partner first. Um, and yeah, so we waited a while to decide to start a family, but it was the best thing we could have done at the time we did it. I
interesting.
think if we did it any earlier, I would have struggled to find my identity through it all because I would have been like, oh, but I haven't done this thing or that thing, or we did everything we could possibly do that was difficult before we decided to have a family. We went on a 5-month honeymoon when we got married.
Wow. Wow.
um, we traveled to South America. We went to
Mm,
Africa. We Galapagos. We climbed Kilimanjaro. We went to Base Camp Everest. We did kind of Inca Trail, like everything we could possibly do that was hard. We
mhm.
did before we got married, before we had kids, rather. And then when we did decide, we were ready. We were lucky enough to be able to have our first when we wanted her,
Yeah.
and then we still had the opportunity to then move to Singapore once she was just about to turn 2. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a great relationship to have with a child. I think it's
Mm.
different to what I expected as well. But another quote I read was that having a child is like winning the lotto but losing a limb.
Winning the
And I don't know
lotto
if that
but
resonates
losing a
with you.
limb. Wow. I'm gonna have to take a snapshot of that. And
Yeah,
wow, what do you mean by that? I know what you mean, coming from a dad
yeah,
myself, but what's your
yeah.
interpretation of that?
That it's something you've always wanted, but you have to give so much of yourself for it, and it changes your identity. As does losing a limb. No, I haven't lost a limb, thank heavens. But
Mm,
I've seen stories of it, or I've spoken to people who have had that, and it changes your identity. You've got to find out who you are after that has happened. So being a mother, who are you? Or as a father, who are you after that event or this being has come into your life?
Who are
And you do
you after this being has come into your life? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So we knew each other through uni,
Hmm.
and I don't know what your recollection of what I was like at uni, but I feel like we're very different. And some of it is age for sure, but I think a lot of it comes from who we found as a life partner, and then the kids in our lives, and how the events of the people in our lives, how they've shaped us, rather than like your work. Like your work does it to an extent, but those relationships are not as strong as the ones within your family. So my child, and both of their personalities are very different,
Hmm.
have changed me a lot.
In a positive way, of course.
In a positive way, and also in a negative way, because they
Wow.
exacerbate the best and the worst of you. So the best of you, the love, I have never felt love to this degree. I could hug and cuddle them all day. I'm a very affectionate person. So that love, I never knew I could love anything that much. Like I
It's
love
an,
my partner, but yeah,
it's an amazing feeling. You can't,
right,
I can't describe it myself.
agree. And every parent says you won't know about that until you have a child. But it exacerbates the worst in me. So I'm not the most patient person in the world when I'm
Mm,
tired and they're not listening. And, I'm more cranky than I've ever been in those situations. So yeah, it's the best and worst. I think
wow.
they're very extremes in
Do you,
sometimes how you're at.
interesting. So you mentioned obviously there are books out there where a lot of parents out there read too much. So do you find yourself going back to read books to see how you can tweak it or fix it? Or have you, like what your
Sometimes,
colleague
yeah.
said, taken it? Throw.
No, I think that that was more at the beginning when they were like a baby and you didn't really know what their personality was going to be. And you're trying really hard to stick to a schedule for sleep. And sometimes the schedules didn't make logical sense to me, for example. It depends
Never
what book
does.
you get.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on the personality wise, like to me, because these books are all about how you handle the child, how to change a
It's
diaper, how
very
to put them to sleep.
methodical. It's very A,
Right,
B, C, one, two, three.
right.
But kids don't fall into that.
No. So I think those books are like, it gives you a snapshot. But for me, when you talk about what do I do now to like change, like when I notice the bad behavior or the negative attitude that I have,
Mhm.
then yes, I will look into that. And something that I sent to you a couple of days ago was this podcast that a friend sent to me about over functioning. And
Mm.
this is a term that a lot of psychologists use about, feeling like you have to be the one that does more. Why can't you just ask for help? Why can't you hand that off to someone else who's more than capable of doing that? So I think I'm working on that aspect because particularly after a second, and this coming back to the advice, having a second child is really hard because now it used to be two adults or potentially three adults, depending on how many people are living in that household with you, looking after one child.
Mhm.
Now it's two adults with two. And that is really hard because it doesn't mean that you can split your time 50-50. Sometimes they need 100% of your time for days on end, and the other one gets nothing. And so you get really stretched, and it's really tough. And some kids are more difficult than others. Let's just be honest.
Mm.
Um, and so yeah, so my second child changed me a lot more than my first did. And actually, I was listening to an interview that Meghan Markle did, um, and she was saying that one child is like a hobby and two is parenting. And that really resonated with me because we loved every experience we had with Zoe, our older one. We were able to really indulge her, really
Because
indulge
you could
ourselves,
focus the
feel
time, you could tag team with your
good focus
husband.
time.
Yeah.
100%. Second one comes along and she was a lot more, I don't like to use the word difficult, but I just can't think of anything right now. She was more, she had more needs.
Mm.
And so I wasn't prepared for that. And
Can you
it
be
was really
prepared?
hard. think maybe my expectations were a little too high with the first,
Interesting.
that it was fairly straightforward. I mean, it was difficult, don't get me wrong, but it was fairly straightforward. Like she
Mhm.
ate well, she slept well, she didn't get sick often. Um, and then Ava came along and she was completely the opposite. And her personality is completely the opposite. So yeah, I don't think you can. And I wasn't very adaptable. And the other thing I wanted to mention with the second is I had her in Singapore. And so the first I had my friends, my family around, and then second we had moved here and I had her here, and my support network was gone. And so I think I, suffered from some postnatal depression as well.
Mm.
And so yeah, it was like a lot of
Because
hormonal issues. It was
you
a
were
lot
on
of,
your own. Is that correct, Sandy? In
yeah,
Singapore, or?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, like I had some friends here, but they weren't to the same depth of friendships you have at home. Um, I think people said to me, because I have hired help here in Singapore, as you know, in Asia, hired help is quite affordable. So I had a hired helper, but they're there to do the chores. They don't lend support, emotional
It's a
support.
different thing altogether.
Right, right.
Mm.
And so she was able to help out so I could take a shower, but it wasn't to the degree of the friendships and the mums groups and the things.
It's the emotional support, really, at the end of the day,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
So,
And my husband was busy with
mm,
Zoe because she was 3 at the time. So yeah, I mean, all of those factors play a part in how I've reacted to the last or the parenting journey.
do you think it has the same effect on your husband, or is this more you
You know.
trying to navigate this journey?
Um, so my husband is an incredibly laid back guy. Everything, I don't think anything in life has phased him, but particularly in the time that I've known him. He's extremely confident. He comes from a like a very secure family in terms of family relationships, bonds, etc. He's also one of 4 boys. He's the
Mm.
youngest of 4 boys. And that makes a huge difference because he didn't have girls around growing up. He didn't see emotion. And now he has 2 daughters. And sometimes he's like, why is there so much crying? Or why do I get so emotional? And so I think he wasn't really used to that. And I think he's had to see it a lot differently from my perspective. A lot of it, I think, is hormonal. I think a lot of it is he's very practical about it. Well, just let her cry it out, or just if she doesn't want to eat, don't
So be
eat.
it.
She's not going to starve. Yeah. Whereas I'm like, trying to prepare 3 different meals to see if she'll eat one of them or half of one, and he's like, why do you do that? So
Mm.
I think he doesn't have the same personality as I do. I think probably, I don't know how well it's come across, with quite type A personality who kind of wants to control something or the situation. So working really hard at that. But he's like, you know, it's fine. That'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Like it is fine. So he is very relaxed. And I wish I had more of that. I'm trying, but it's really hard. I think
Mm.
sometimes my stressing out stresses him out a little bit as well. So it festers in the household when there's a lot of high tension. But one thing that we never do is go to bed angry at each other. We talk it through.
That's lovely.
We talk about the stress, because if you do, you never have a good night's sleep and all those things.
It's
But I
terrible.
mean, what about you? Because you have a very jovial personality, and are
Yeah.
you the same as a dad as well?
Parenting has so many facets to it. Just give me an example of a scenario, because I can't give you
So
like a
say,
bulletproof answer, because it so
mm,
varies so much.
so say your child just doesn't want to eat his dinner. Is just not interested, running around the house, um, just pushes the bowl away,
Mm.
doesn't want to sit down and eat his dinner. And he's hungry because you know, it's dinner time and he hasn't eaten in several hours. What do you do?
I think you made a good point where your personality comes out, right? It either exacerbates it in terms of the positive, or it really strengthens the other side of the coin, so to speak, right? So for me, my son, I'm very big on discipline.
Okay.
Discipline, focus. If you're speaking with someone, if you're eating, you're playing games, right? That's what you do. You focus.
Yeah.
You sit down, you do it, you give it your 100%. Excuse the term, there's nothing half-assed.
Yeah.
So I think inevitably when I speak with my son, he does it all the time. Mornings, lunch, dinner, he's always distracted. And fair enough,
Yeah.
A bit of a caveat sometimes, Sandy, is that I need to take a step back and realize that my son's only 4 years old.
Yeah.
And discipline, focus is words that don't make sense to him. So getting back to your scenario and how I approach it is that I'm pretty firm. Son, if you're eating your pizza slices, you sit down and you eat it, you do not move. You focus on the task at hand. If you're speaking to grandma about something and you need help, you say it to grandma, you focus, you get it done. No going around all around and running up and down, and it's crazy, right? So for me, yes, I do raise my voice sometimes, Sandy. But I'm very conscious of talking to my son, even though he's 4 years old, but he's very sharp. He's very observant. I sit down with him, I go, son, we need to do this because of X, Y, Z. So I try to rationalize it. And I come from a family, Sandy, where when I was growing up, each to their own. Naturally, my dad was raised a certain way and so on, no judgments. I was never really allowed to talk back, so to speak.
Oh, same.
But, no right or wrong here. I'm not here to judge. Now, when it comes to my son, if he talks back at me, I go, okay, son, that's fair. Why is it that you said X, Y, Z? So I try to rationalize it. Needless to say, he's 4 years old, so it works probably 5% of the time, maybe less.
Yeah.
But I like to believe that I'm instilling discipline and focus because those are values that I find very important. And that's how I handle that particular situation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that that you just reminded me of a situation. I was talking to a much older cousin of mine who had two kids at the time. I said, well, I remember talking, but this is way before I had kids, and I said, how do you discipline them? And they don't smack. I mean, that's not how she wants to raise her children. But she said they would have meetings, and her kid was 2 or 3 at the time, her younger one. And I said, do they understand? And she goes, and like you said, maybe she understands 5% of what I'm saying, but next year she'll understand 10%, maybe more. And it will stick. So she will pull her aside and she would talk to her, and trying to get her to understand. And that she says it's a lot more work for sure. But it lasts longer because it starts instilling. Whereas I think I don't know what it was like in your family, but in my family and many ethnic Asian families or many families, it doesn't matter what race you are, that smacking was the norm.
Hey.
And that's how you discipline.
And that's,
that's to each their own. But now I think we have to be better. We have to be smarter about it. We've got to really try and nurture the child. So discipline is not just discipline. Discipline comes with nurturing as well. And so
it's multifaceted.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm trying really hard at that as well. I mean, I lose my temper a lot faster than my husband does. But yeah, we try and talk it out, separate them from the situation, close the door, take them away from the situation that they're upset about. When her sister's snatching her toy, the older one, if Ava, my younger one, is snatching her sister's toy, which she does often, sometimes she gets very upset. She'll, so take her away and let's talk about it. Why does she do that? What can you do? Those kinds of things. And it's harder, but you have to often remove them from an emotional situation. Otherwise, there's no point talking to them when they're super upset about something. So yeah, so we try and do as many things as we can, and we try to be consistent, but it's tough. Can't say it's the same every day.
There's no right or wrong. I actually went to a parenting course, Sandy.
Did you?
It was actually like a 8-week parenting course that I went to every single week.
Did you do this before the kid? Before the kid came along?
Yeah, I did this probably when my son Theo was like 1 year old.
Okay.
I'm very thankful that I'm very curious. So a lot of the times I'm driven more by curiosity and to learn something new. It was called Circle of Security. So the reason why I'm saying this, Sandy, is that I'm a big fan of letting Theo literally do whatever he wants.
Okay.
He can talk back, he can do whatever he wants. And I'm always there to hold him if he falls. So for me, I have zero expectations.
Okay.
I really take it as it comes. But how you're describing yourself, Sandy, is very similar to my wife.
Okay.
So I'm curious, Sandy, is it the need to control, or is it need to do a perfect job? Or is it one and the same?
I think both of those things create the response. So the need to control it, because you've lost a lot of that control. You have a human being that won't listen to you at the time you want them to. They're not following your schedule, which is ridiculous. Like you said, you know, you're very young.
Wear a watch. You need to wear a watch.
Yeah. I mean, my older daughter loves her watch now, so she knows what time bedtime is and things like that. But yeah, like it's that. So it's the need to control, I think. But also, if we come back to doing a perfect job, we have been brought up in, especially in my family, to be excellent at everything you do.
To excel,
You
to
have
achieve.
Yeah, for sure. To do all of that. And yet, as a parent, how do you rate that? How do you rate that you're doing a good job? No one's giving you a report card.
No.
So how do you respond to that? And also, when you're not doing well one day, it can seem like the worst thing in the world when your child says something bad to another kid, or hits another kid, or falls over and completely scrapes their knee, and it was because you had turned your back for 1 second to check a message on your phone. Like whatever the case may be, you feel like you failed. And it's a huge amount of expectation on a parent.
Wow.
I agree. It's very hard to not have that when you've always been good at what you do, or you've always worked really hard at what you do. And it's always been a linear or an exponential achievement to get to the goal. What is the goal of parenting? Don't know. Is it to let them eat all their food, to make sure that they're a healthy human being? What about their mind? What about extracurricular activities? What about excelling in one thing? Dance, music, art? Like, what is
how do we compete with the person next to us who's doing piano lessons and swimming lessons and tennis lessons?
Exactly.
Is
and
that
so I think all
wow.
of that, yeah, it's hard.
Is it an upbringing thing, Sandy, where you have that need to go, you know what, career tick, marriage tick, travel the world tick, parenting, I got to get that tick?
Yeah, I think so. I think also we don't ever hear the words, "You're doing a great job," as a parent. Who's going to tell you that? Your kid's not going to say that.
You're not going to get a report card, by the way.
No trophy.
Nothing. You'll get nothing.
Yeah. So how do you know you're doing a good job? You don't. You kind of just have to wing it. But a lot of the time, I think something that I started to really pay attention to postpartum is what I was looking for. And there were so many times that I have many mum friends who sent a message or a call or came over and just gave you a pat on the back and said, "You're doing an amazing job." And I try and identify in friends. I saw a friend of mine who I used to work with, and she was excellent at work. She had a child, and her Facebook post said, 8 hours today, and I have done nothing. And I responded with, You fed a child 8 times in those early days. You changed a diaper at least 8 times. You, you whatever it was that you did, you changed their clothes. You did this. You did. I said that is an achievement. You didn't do nothing. You did everything you could possibly do for someone else all day. That's a huge achievement. You are an amazing mom. And she just broke down because those hard days where you get no affirmation is so hard. But just for someone to recognize your effort goes a long, long way. And that can be a partner, that can be a friend, it can be a neighbor, it can be a grandparent. Some days it can be a child. I mean, my daughter is so acutely aware of this stuff. She says that, I think you're doing a great job, mommy. She says that because she hears me say that to friends. And those days you just melt. It makes it all worth it.
You do. Like I can branch this up into so many different facets, Sandy. Why is there such, if I were to okay, we've got parenting, right? We've got so many facets about life. Let's go another level here, right? And we can jump around and whatnot. Why is there such a fascination with achievement? Why is there a need to be the best? I need to be better. There's nothing wrong with it, right? My angle is that I do find sometimes when, like, I think it is different, when I talk to my fellow friends who are dads and whatnot, because there is a bit of a difference in how we speak, right? Parenting, why there is a need to be a perfect parent, so to speak. Getting back to my parenting course, they made it very clear that good enough is good enough. And and for me, a pat of the, it's lovely to get a pat on the back. It's fantastic. You're doing a great job, X, Y, Z. Keep at it. I think for me, just bringing back to my personal experiences, Sandy, I try to remove myself from, I'm very wary of not outsourcing my happiness to others, so to speak. With that, it's very important for me that when I do something, I do it because I believe it's the right thing to do, not because I will get a pat on the back. I know that my son, he's never going to say it, and that's fine. It's okay. But I know deep down, I'm just doing my best, really. Yeah.
And I think my husband feels the same way. And I think maybe it's the role in the family. I think the mums always have I'm gonna back up. Mums don't always have the bigger role, but in the families of the friends that I know, they do play a bigger role, particularly in the start of a child's life. I took a year off for my older daughter, and I went back part-time. For my younger one, the same thing. I wanted to afford her the same amount of time. I couldn't go back part-time. I was starting a new job. And also in Asia, no one works part-time. And so I had to take a big backseat. I was told in my career when I went on mat leave with Zoe, I was going for a promotion. At the time, I was growing the business. It was very successful. Had I left a year later, it would have made a difference, but you can't always control these things. Okay,
no,
so
you can't.
I left at the time and I did. And I had coaching conversations and mentoring conversations where they talked about pre-Zoe and post-Zoe in these discussions.
They actually made that distinction.
They made that distinction.
Wow.
And they said to me, post-Zoe, you're going to be different. You may not be able to travel interstate to do a presentation. You may not be able to travel overseas. And I said, well, is that your decision or is that my decision? And they said, you just won't be in the right headspace. And again, is that your decision or is that my decision?
You actually said that?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they said, well, let's just see how it happens when it happens. Okay. But yeah, you are definitely overlooked for a lot. So coming back to the identity thing, you achieve a lot. I've been in, my schooling career, my university career, my work career has always been to achieve something. and you become a parent, and it's great. It's a wonderful achievement in and of itself. But my life had to change a lot, whereas my husband's life didn't. From a work and identity perspective, he became a dad. He added that to his overall personality. But 3 weeks after I had Zoe, he went on a business trip to Chicago for a week. Could a mother do that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So you think, how is it different? My identity, a mother's identity, changes a lot more after having a child than a father's identity. And until we bridge that gap of knowing how do we co-parent properly, share the mental burden properly, share the household chores and the household burden of now things are out of control more properly, I think we, as a mother, for me at least, it will always feel like my identity has taken a much bigger turn than my
Wow.
partner's.
Wow. Because in your
So
response,
yeah, I mean,
wow.
I mean, I was told by leaders in my team, leaders in my organization that were making decisions on my promotion and my pay, that said, well, you're a mum now, maybe you take your foot off the gas for a while. So in my mind, I knew that if I was to have 2 kids, and I always planned on having 2, that it would be it's a 5-year hiatus, stagnation from work, at least for 1 kid in my mind. With the second, I thought, okay, I might have them 2-3 years apart. To me, it was a 5 to 8 year stagnation. So that's how I felt in the job that I was in when I had my child,
That's
both my children.
that's brutal. That's brutal. It's
It's reality though.